What is going on? What is going on, people? It is Michael Seville, your real estate guide, otherwise here in Palm Beach County, Florida. And on the other side of the screen, I wish we could see him, but
Yeah, yeah. I wish we could see me too. But you know what? You all get to enjoy that little circle of a face of mine. I'm somewhere behind that screen. Just like to say, we're glad to be back here with you again. I'm Joel Simmons from the Tenacity Foundation, being as tenacious as I can possibly be in the place to be with my boy Michael Seville, community beacon style.
shouts out, shouts out. We are on the third part of our series. We've been talking about family matters, courtroom realities for the last couple of weeks. The first weeks we kind of went over some terms. Last week we spoke about what to expect. This week we are going to talk about how we can reframe the battle and how not to be a victim. But prior to that, let's run this commercial that my brother spent some time doing or haven't done, his team haven't done. You ready?
There it is. Let's run it.
All right. Oh, 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 oh.
We are here.
Shouts out to Tenacity Foundation and the team for putting that together. I'm the guy in the overalls at the beginning of the commercial where you're standing in court.
I'm not in that courtroom.
And let me tell you what, stay out.
Oh
Stay out.
man.
And
Oh
and
man.
and I want to preface this. I want to preface this entire, you know, before we get into it by saying the best place to be in the courtroom is to not be in the courtroom. It's you're going up and you're going in front of a judge who's there to be biased in regards to the law and in regards to the evidence that's being presented. And I'm gonna shout out my judge all the time. I thought she did exactly what I thought she would do in regards to what I would thought being fair looked like. There were certain times where you're just like, ah, but there's times where you're just like, ah, if
Mm.
that makes sense. Like it's like what do you expect? Like what do you expect with when we're talking about the different narratives, the different things that come along with the courtroom, and but once you kind of understand, you can you kind of know what to expect. So a lot of things don't take you by surprise. So a win is a win if you're going in there with a reasonable mindset, is what I spoke about last week. This week, let's get into reframing the battle and how not to be a victim. And I thought this was
Reframing the battle. Reframing. Reframing the
reframing.
battle.
And I thought it was important that we speak about this, brother. And I'm glad that you allowed this topic to happen as well, because we hear so many different things, especially from people who are finished with their trial. They may be finished with their trial, or they might be heading into it, and they do feel things are unbiased. And it's easy. It's easy to fall and get into a place of thinking that what how did I get here? Poor me, woe me. You know, this is not fair. This is not, I want to win. I want to do this. I want to do that. You hear this a lot surrounding it. And when the outcomes don't happen that way, and like I said, oftentimes it's not, you're not going to get everything you want, within the, as you're going back and forth, because naturally the reason why you and this other person aren't together is because there are things that you don't agree on, and these things that you don't agree on may come to head. And so you mix in a little bit of pride, you mix in some ego, you mix in lack of humbleness, you mix in money, and it can get thrown totally out of proportion.
I like it. I like it. I like it. I wanted to touch base just on that word, that reframe. Framing or to express words or a concept or plan differently. I think that that's huge. Reframing anything. I just had this conversation with my boy Wayne Dawson the other day, and we started to dive in deep about how we reframe the past, reframing memories, creating good memories out of bad memories. And it's like, this is a big, this is a huge topic. It probably deserves its own episode all by itself because it's a skill. You can learn how to reframe something so that it doesn't hurt, or so that you can process, or so that you can move forward.
Hmm.
These are skills that need to be shared. I mean, man to man, men, we need to know how to reframe, and we need to practice reframing. And I have to say this, watching my brother go through a situation the way he did, I could tell that he was using this skill. And having dealt with multiple other people that have gone through this type of process, this is probably the most difficult piece of all of it. Now, I know I haven't been through this scenario, so take that with a grain of salt, right? But just from being on the outside looking in and doing my best to be empathetic to what is happening on the inside, I'm watching these things go along, and there are some extremely small pieces of the puzzle that men are getting locked into,
Hmm.
and they can't see beyond their own hands. They can't see anything. And because they can't see, it seemed like the system just swallows them up. Their own lawyers will give up on them. The woman will have the upper hand even when she has done wrong, even when she has done, and this is me saying this, quote unquote, evil, because there's some things that I have seen where I'm like, whoa, that ain't just wrong anymore. That's that's evil right there. You can't do that. But people do what they do. And I'm watching this thing, and a brother will get locked into something that should not matter. And it's because their frame of mind is so stuck. It's like having tires in the mud, and they are just wailing at that accelerator going nowhere.
And what happens, brother, to your point, is that when we're stuck in that same place, we often become reactive instead of responsive.
Ooh.
So even if we are in a decent place in regards to, like the system is a system, it's inanimate. It is what it is. There's bills, there's laws, there's statutes, and they don't change that often, right? And if they do start to change, it takes time to change. I'm looking at the vote today. I went in to go vote, and I see that marijuana is back on the ballot in regards to adults having it over the age of 21. And so 60% of people have to vote in favor of this in order for it to take place, right? For us to come up with a statute for in regards to it. But this is not the first time that it's been on the ballot. It's probably been on the ballot the last at least the last 2 to 3 election cycles, and it still hasn't gotten to a point because but over time it's going to change because people change, times change, so on and so forth. This is the thing with the system tends to be, it is what it is. Now within the system you have biases, so you have to pay attention to that, but it's hard for you to pay attention to that when, as you mentioned, you can't see past your hand. You're taking all of these different things in, and really it becomes almost personal, and you're expecting it. And I I think the word that you used is the correct word. It's evil. And I know they say there's a lesser evil and there's a bigger evil, but evil is evil. So whether it's you're withholding your child, whether it's some form of parental alienation, whether it's abuse, whether it's some disgusting things, bringing other people into the situation, which happens a lot, and which was interesting to me, is that you're going through this court battle and you're bringing in other parties. And when I say other parties, I mean other Now all of a sudden you're getting other partners. You're not even divorced yet, and you have another partner, or you're pregnant, or someone else is pregnant for you, so on and so forth. And you just get deeper and deeper into this whole situation. And here's another one, a quick one of my sayings is that when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging.
Mm,
Stop making this thing harder on yourself. And you do that through the reframing. Also, I would say being resilient, because a lot of this may be your first time going through this process for most people, right? It's your first time going through it. You don't know what to expect. And so instead of being still and probably seeking information or seeking good counsel, you may be seeking things to make you feel better. And some of these attorneys are out here to make you feel better, even though they know that it only can go in regards to this statute, if that makes sense.
mm. I think that's perfect sense. And being resilient, I like that you brought that up because you need a lot of resilience. You need a lot of resilience. You need to be able to get up. You need to be able to reframe. You need to be able to rethink, and then you need to be motivated to move forward. Always driving forward. And there's times when we get stuck. Listen, I don't want to keep going into some of these smaller pieces of the conversation. I think that some of this stuff is going to pop up again because I know that you have a lot to state and a lot to bring to the table. And this is very important for men to hear this type of stuff, and women too. But this definitely geared a lot towards our men. And if women are able to find something out of it, then it, great, great.
Awesome. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's the first thing I want to get into in regards to reframing is that one of the terms that you hear a lot within the family court system is high conflict. And high conflict is essentially I agree on something, you don't agree on something, and we don't agree on the same thing. We want to go in opposite directions, and we keep bringing it up. And there's extremes to it, and there's things that are could seem from the outside, anyways, like pretty simple to come to an understanding in regards to, but when you're fueled with this stuff, and really when communication breaks down, because communication breaks down very easily in the family court system, you'll start to hear, oh, I need to talk to my attorney. You start getting those texts, you start to get those emails, I need to speak with my attorney about this, I need to speak to my attorney about that. And so there's really no communication that's happening, so even some of the simplest things end up being broad. um, and so what I say to that was getting into it. So each person, you'll see each parent that will claim the other parent is he's a high conflict parent. And this is the judge is not saying this. This is each parent saying this. Oh, I'm dealing with a high conflict parent, or the other person's high conflict. And how I started to reframe the situation is that I'm not dealing with a high conflict parent. It's out the door. Essentially, and this is for me to take accountability and responsibility for it. So I shifted to saying, like, this is just a high conflict situation. And essentially everything that's in this court system is a high conflict situation. Like, because if it wasn't a high conflict situation, we wouldn't be here. Because at what point in time do you and this person that you at some point hopefully had some type of feelings for, that brought a child into this world, or and we're just speaking in regards to child custody now, we can get into divorce at some point in time, but we brought a child into this world. At what point in time did we realize that these there's no way to resolve a conflict? There's no conversation that could be had between the two of us to resolve whatever conflict this is. Or at what point in time do you all feel that there's no value in the other parent's opinion, or thoughts about a matter? Like, there's no consideration involved in it. And the only way that we can come to an agreement is through the court. During a deposition, I heard someone say, well, how can we improve the communication? And the other person said, through the court system. So right, so immediately you're in a high conflict situation because your thought process is invalued. So how do you reframe that? How do you reframe by blaming the other person? Because that's what we would often go to. It's because it's easy, right? It's easy to blame somebody else for having to go through this situation. Like, why do we need, this other person doesn't want to listen to, well, maybe you don't know how to communicate better. Like, what is the communication like? How much are you communicating this? What is your tone? And we speak about this a lot, brother, in regards to communication, about our tone and when or how we say things.
Yes. Uh, I want to enter in a couple of words, like from communication to connection. Number one, there's a difference between the two of them. One of them leads to the other. And I'm mentioning this as far as, where you're leading into um, when is it too much? When have we reached that point where it's too much? Well, the thing is I believe that a lot of these relationships, we go into these relationships and we expect relationships to be perfect. That's the way it works. That's how it works. I mean, if you read the book, The Five Love Languages, it talks about the difference between being in love versus love. And I love the way that he positioned it too. In one sense, in love is this is this feeling that comes about and it doesn't last long.
Mm,
It's like motivation. There's a difference between motivation and determination. There's a difference between being uh, inspired and having drive. There's just this difference. And the way he brings it about is like you fall in love with somebody because of all of the great things that they do for you. They check all the boxes. But once you enter into a deeper relationship, is when, oh man, I didn't know you did this. I didn't know you did that. I didn't know you thought this way. Some of these things become uncovered. We talked about the mask before. Once that mask really starts to come off, then we start to see this person and we start to nitpick different things out of them.
yeah.
Now, here's the case. If you want to be, if you want to have that true love, you have to take that communication from, hey, I'm communicating with this person because I want something that they are giving. I'm desirous of something they are giving me. It checks my boxes. To I am committed to be on a deep connection with them, which is emotional intelligence. We went over that before too. And that requires you to be able to self manage yourself, which is, um, taking care of your own grounds, to socially manage your relationship. And these things require perspective and humility. And a lot of times we're missing these things. Egos begin to get in the way, and somebody begins to feel like they deserve something. This should happen to me because I've whatever, enter whatever your narrative. And that's not the way love works. You love simply because you love, and love never requires return.
Mm,
That's a hard thing to say, but love does not require return. When we think about the Lord, he said, we love him because he first loved us. God never received return for love in order for him to love us. Another scripture said he came to his own and his own knew him not. God never required love from us to give us love. To be like that, we should give love without expecting return and be grateful for love when it is in return. When people love you simply because they love you, it makes the relationship stronger. But that requires humility, it requires persistence, it requires to move from communication to connection.
I love it, brother. Here's one of the things that I want to mention in regards to that is that, and the connection part may take patience, because at the
Mm,
point that we get to where we are now, this is not going to change overnight, right? If this person goes out and petitions for custody, or this person goes out and is looking for child support, which are two totally different things. I want to remind you all that I am paying this much for the child. I'm not getting any time. That you need a petition. You need a petition for your timeshare, and for paternity, and then your timeshare. You need to have patience because it didn't get to that place overnight. There's a lot of things involved. I think especially with a child, like as men, we have to look at what do they call it? Postpartum postpartum is it postpartum depression?
Postpartum depression
Yeah,
for
post like
ladies after
yeah, for
after the
after they have
baby has been born.
yeah,
Hmm.
they can. I mean, there's a lot of you gotta think that, and for both of you all, like the pressure because having a child is probably tougher than signing on the dotted line for your house, right? I would imagine, like once you start to have this child as a man, you automatically start to see accountability and responsibility. Your mind is in a place, whereas this woman's mind may be in a different place, and so there's a lot of things that are going on and fueling this. So this is going to take grace. It should have been grace probably and compassion initially, but at this point in time, once that has broken down and we're into this process, it is going to take some patience and resilience and compassion in order to get to that connection, which means I've heard someone say that if they think of you a certain kind of way, if you show up with love, maybe not in the first or second time, but over time, and I'm working on this, they'll notice the difference because initially they're thinking of you a certain kind of way and you're thinking of them a certain kind of way because that communication is not there, let alone the connection part of it. So you may ask, and we're going to the next part of accountability and responsibility, is like, how did I get here? Like you hear that a lot with men, like what could I have done better? What are the difference? And I'm not saying that you blaming yourself. This is not about self blame, but this is just some of the things that we do naturally as men. Or yeah, and I'm speaking for men. We start to say like, how did we get ourselves in this position? And what I would advise to do, kind of how to reframe that thought process, is to you know think about some of the good in this person that you chose them in order to have your child, and vice versa, right? Like what are the good things about them? Because I doubt, and I hope not, that you weren't just picking someone who was just from the beginning showed all kinds of different signs. And I also want to preface all of this within this conversation by saying I'm not talking about these extremes, right? If you're being abused physically, if certain things, if this person turns out to be a classic, whatever word that we're not going to use because it has to have some type of mental diagnosis, you have to go to a psychologist, psychiatrist for this. But those are the extreme cases. These are 10 to 15% of it. 80 to 85% of the time on the other side is just these are just normal people who decided they no longer wanted to be together because they, for whatever reason. So we reflect on what was good about this person. And brother, what you said at the beginning is that this thing is not perfect,
Hmm.
right? Like and probably that's why a lot of people are no longer together because they were expecting perfection. And once again, mixed, and I think a lot of this has to do is to be mixed with the different hormones and different things because a person that has a child all the way through and has all these different changes within their body, and now they're taking care of a child, whatever it is. But there's a lot of grace and compassion that one can have on both ends of it because it's a huge responsibility. And I think most people would take this responsibility seriously. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
I like that. I like that. And I feel like it goes right back to that same, like, here's the scenario. Love is messy. Like, it's messy. It's messy. People are going to make mistakes, and we believe that they should be perfect. Because and I'm going to tell you something, there's a narrative that has been written inside of our minds, and I think that we need to think about this as we're total different subject, but as we are changing what TV allows to show our children, we need to consider this, because many of us have grown up in the days and in the ages where the man fights the battle. He goes to war with the dragon, with the dinosaur, with the the crime boss, with whoever, in order to get the woman. And when he gets her, they kiss, they love each other, end scene. And it's like, that must have been a perfect marriage. And then you go and watch a different movie where the movie depicts like the reality, and the wife and the husband are bickering and fighting. And you got like these two choices. One of them is give everything you got in the very beginning and you get the perfect woman. And the second one is struggle with the non-perfect woman for the rest of your life and live miserably. And I don't, it doesn't work that way. That's not the truth. But the script that has been given to us since we were young children is, when you're a kid, you battle the beast, you get the woman. When you're older, you just are stuck with the old battle axe. And those are the two scripts that you're given. And so somewhere in the middle of this, everyone's getting lost. And the
Right.
thing is like, in order for us to get to that stage where we can actually make things work, when when your girl is pregnant, we have to start thinking, okay, this is the beast that I need to slay now. Well, what are you talking about, Joel? I'm talking about, how do I stay connected with her? See, I can't feel that baby moving. I don't know what it feels like for a hand to grab the rib from the inside. I don't know what it feels like for that baby to have gas and then I have gas. I don't understand what it feels like for the baby to be hungry and only want to eat a pickle at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't get that. But if a man can take the time to fight that battle with his wife, with his girl, maybe he starts getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not saying you have to eat a pickle, eat ice cream, whatever it is. But when we start to move from communication to connection, and we connect with her as she goes through those different steps. Now, whether that's masculine or not, I don't know. I can't tell you. I can tell you one thing. If you start to do the things that allows you to connect with her, and you communicate that, that's what you're doing, and you ask her to connect with you, seeing that you're unable. I'm not saying go buy one of these little baby things and put it around your waist and act like you're having a baby. I don't think that that's, I don't agree with that type of stuff. I think a man needs to be a man, a woman needs to be a woman. But and I also don't think that just because she's pregnant, that now all of a sudden, I have to do things that are totally different than what I would normally do for my wife or my lady. I don't think that that's the case either. When my wife had had our first child, she still went to work every single day. You know, there was things that I could do for her. I did those things for her. When she had appointments, I showed up to those appointments. If there's anything, maybe I start talking to the baby. Maybe I start talking to my wife about how we're going to respond to this together, how we're going to stick together. Hey, listen, we used to go out to eat all the time. We used to go on trips all the time. How do we maintain these things? Because sometimes what will end up happening is that the relationship will be built with the baby and the man is lost.
There's a thought. There's that grace and compassion. And and I know we're already in it, but as the brother spoke about, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
There it
Because
is.
because you about to you're about to pay. All right, let me get a couple things else in. I wanted to really talk about understanding, and I got it as part of my notes, understanding the cost of litigation. Last week we spoke about preparation. I really want to inform you, like, what exactly does this look like? Um, because a lot of us want to blame these things on the attorney, and I think I looked it up earlier. Um, and I said it last week, but it's family law and divorce legal services industry in the United States. It states that it's a $13.1 billion industry. It's a $13.1 billion industry, and that is for the attorneys. We haven't even spoken about all the other extra things that go along with it, like mediation, psychological evaluations, so on and so forth. So you got to be looking at this number here. Is that it? What it says? Attorney fees on average, family law attorneys cost between $200 and $500 an hour, and the typical custody case can range from $10,000 to $30,000. Now we're in Florida, where people claim that it's a pro dad state, and they say it's a pro dad state because it's a little bit less biased towards fathers. There's actual bills and statutes that were passed as of last year, 2023, July. You now, if you're not wed, you have the presumption of the same rights as the mother, even though you're not married. And
Mm.
that even that being said, right? Because the mother, what's the old saying? Possession is 9/10 of the
Nine
law.
tenths of the law.
I don't even know where that comes from. So one day I'm gonna have to look it up. But it's very true in this case as well, because she has the child, right? And we spoke about the tender-year doctrine versus the best interest factors now, but most people still operate on their feelings, and their feelings tell them that it's the tender-year doctrine. Therefore, the mother has access to the child. It's coming out of her body. So she can say whether she wants you in that hospital room or not. She can tell you where you can, when you can take the child. And even on the flip side, if there's nothing in place, you can take the child and not give it back to the father without any ramifications, supposedly. But you got to really think about this. If she calls the police because she's supposed to get her child, and you have the child in your possession at your house, and the officers knock on your door, like, and she just gave birth, here's where the bias comes in within the system. Although they don't really have any any grounds, and this is in Florida, any grounds to take that child from you, I think by the end of that conversation, you more likely most people are going to give it that child. It takes a whole different kind of person not to give the child back. I'm just saying this like the average guy. The average guy is just not going to give a infant back to the mother, right? You know what I mean? It's just the biases that we grew up with and that we have. So this person has this child, and so I tell fathers, if you don't have any guidance, you don't understand the processes in the system, and you do want to be in your children's life, it's going to be about $15,000 to do the case somewhat right. Like if you just woke up and you don't know anything about the family law system and you're attempting to figure it out, it's going to be around 15 grand, right? And this is even though you have the presumption of the same rights as the mother. And if the and that's also if the mother wants to make this extremely difficult for you. And the sooner you get started, the sooner you can start to gain these, you know, have these rights, or like I said, petition for paternity, because the mother, especially if the mother denies that you're the father, which most of them won't because they do want child support, and then to figure out some type of temporary timeshare until you get your day in court, which is about yeah. Appreciate I appreciate that, brother. Uh, so 180 days. So in my experience, I say you need to. This is how you reframe it, because a part of the reframing this thing is gaining clarity towards what is happening, because this thing is happening. And brother, you can chime in if you hear the same stories, because you talk to a lot of men who are going through this similar thing. And one of the things that they don't have clarity on it, but they're complaining about what's going on within the system. Like they
Mm.
don't they don't know what exactly they're supposed to do, and they're being told by these attorneys. And we can go into this. What I say, the attorneys, it's $200 to $500 an hour, and these attorneys, most of them are charging you for emails. They're charging you for phone calls. They're charging you to write up motions. They're charging you to write up petitions, any kind of paperwork. They're charging you for having conversations with the other party. They're charging you for hearings. Then we have trial. If you're going to trial, they're charging you for preparation. They're charging you for so just something as simple as writing up the first petition and doing it correctly, because you got people who make mistakes as well. you're already, they're going to take retainers of around 5,000, between 5,000 and $7,500, and that's just the start. What I find interesting as well, and I don't have this number up here, is that it's between 90 and 92% of all cases settle outside of the court. Out of they don't go to trial. They settle outside of the court system, and that's usually more than likely because of a person finally gets it. Like, okay, this is what I'm looking at in regards to the statutes, and or they're saying I've run out of money. I don't know what to do. But the sooner you get your thing started as well, the less that you have to recover on. Because what I've also found, and brother, once again, I love to hear what you have to say about it, is that I find that people are correcting things, that you spend a lot of time, energy, and money making a correction versus doing it right the first time, some most oftentimes out of ignorance and or compassion. What do you think?
Ask that last question again. You said people are correcting things. What do you mean by that?
So there's times when one of the biggest things that happen one of the things that happens within the custody cases is you're essentially you're fighting against status quo. So if you're having issues with the opposite parent, the opposing parent, whether it's for our cases it's the mom, the longer you allow this thing to go on, meaning that you don't actually file anything, you kind of go off whatever it is that they say, whether it's because of being threatened or you don't know what to do, whatever the case is, you now have to make up for that time, because what the court system likes to see is stability. That's one of the best interest factors, is that the courts, most courts and most judges are going to interpret stability and what the status quo, what is currently going on, what has been going on for the first year of the child's life, what's going on for the first year, the second year. So what happens is that you and this other another person and the opposite parent break up, and you may not want to see that person or have no conversations because they're making it tough for you to see the child. So you go along with it thinking that they may change their mind about how this thing happens, when in reality, I've started to see a lot of resentment happen in regards to the opposite
Mhm.
parents, and I'm talking about the woman. You start to see a lot of resentment. Maybe another person has come into the picture, and now you have to make up for that. That costs more money, because now your argument that you have to make has to be even more compelling. You started off with the presumption of having the same rights as the mother, but then you disappear for 6 months because of
Mm.
shame, guilt, whatever it is that you got going on. And now all of a sudden 6 months later is that you think that the thoughts or feelings have changed. You might, I've seen brothers make that phone call, hey, how are you and the child doing, or send a text message, can you send me some pictures? And what you think is uh, that your absence has made the heart grow fonder is actually the opposite.
Mm.
There's even more negative effect. And so now since the 6 months, 8 months have gone by without you having a conversation, now instead of you starting off with overnight visits, it might be just supervised visits for a couple hours. And this is what the court order says. Well, you haven't seen the child for 6 to 8 months. You can't just go off of, you can't just get the child because you weren't there for the first 8 months. We need to reintroduce you to the child. So at this point in time, they might say you need to go see a psychiatrist with the child. What they call it oh my gosh, what's the term for it? It's I don't know, but it's basically when they kind of bring you back into the system,
Mm.
and being around the child. So now you got to pay for, not only do you have to pay for all the other fees that you're going to pay for initially, now you have to pay for a counselor. Now you may have to pay for someone to supervise you, which costs X amount of money. So now you're spending 200-300 bucks to spend time with your child for hour to 2 hours in a public space. And that has to happen for a certain amount of time. So it's a lot. So now you have to correct things instead of getting it right initially the first time.
Mm. I, there's a lot. I see a lot of resentment. I see
Right.
a lot of resentment um, among women. Among women, This is something that needs to happen. First off, let me just, this is my disclaimer. I believe that men and women should get marriage counseling when they get serious about a relationship. If you think that your relationship is going to go in the direction of possible marriage at whatever time, and here's the reality, men, we have to stop thinking, I ain't never going to get married. I'm just going to have this relationship because it's good right here. When you when you're putting yourself into a relationship and you're going to be monogamous with this one individual, and you're going to hold them to the standards, and they're going to hold you to the standards of being monogamous the entire time, you are entering into a relationship that has marriage like lifestyle. And sometimes men, we got a lot of good men out there that have this monogamous style relationship with women, and they are not intending on getting married just yet because the last relationship fell flat on its face. And because of that, we're not dealing with the elephant or elephants that are in the room. We're not dealing with those little things that cause people to get upset. We're not dealing with those things. So I just want to put that out there because you can probably see the resentment coming your direction off of something small. You can probably see these things coming. And you were alluding to something, Mike, you were stating it, as a matter of fact, that once you're gone for 6 months, listen, time does not heal all things. It just doesn't. Not alone. Not alone. Maybe if I'm working on the relationship while we're, and she's working on the relationship, but if I'm doing all the work and she's doing no work, she quite possibly may still be stuck 6 months ago in hate mode, in resent mode, and you ain't never done a thing mode. And now you come back, I'm a changed man, thinking that simply because you said that she's supposed to respond with, I'm so glad. No, it doesn't work that way. And this is something that I've had to deal with some of these men with. Men will bring some issues to me and they'll tell me about what's going on with their lady, with their wife. And they're struggling with them. Here's the second part of that marriage counseling. Once you get married, keep going to counseling. There's no reason to really stop. Even if you do a checkup with your priest, your pastor, or whoever it is that married you every 6 months, keep doing it. Everybody needs a little bit of help, a little bit of outside helps, because what ends up happening is um, we start harnessing bad vibes, bad feelings, bad thoughts. Somebody did something that we didn't like. We said we forgave them. We really didn't. We moved on. Kiki, ha, ha, ha. Go on vacation. Then another thing happens. We get upset. Sometimes the same thing happens. Men, how many times did this happen? Where you did something, you made a mistake, she said she forgave you, then you came back months later and something, not even the same thing happened, and she gets busted up, upset, and then she mentions the last thing that she forgave you about. A few months later, happens again, and you start to recognize that she's been mentioning stuff from 3 years ago. That's resentment building, and we don't see these cues, but somebody else can. So even if you're not able to do, joint couples counseling or marriage counseling, start to get some of that stuff out. So maybe there's some guide out there that can say, hey man, you need to look out for that. I think it's time for you to bring your lady friend on in here. There needs to be some discussions because there's some things that she hasn't held. Because what'll end up happening is when the baby comes and when that final thing happens, we call it the straw that broke the camel's back. When that thing happens, oh, now she has a reason, and it's called flooding. Flooding begins to happen. And flooding, what is flooding? Flooding is when every single thought, emotion, every single thing, negative thing that she has ever felt, it begins to flood into her emotional capacity and it overflows and it breaks the walls of her emotional storage and it causes for all of these things to just pour out. And that's when you get that person you feel like you ain't never seen before
I
to
ain't never
show up
seen.
to the house. And the first thing that you're going to say is, where did that come from? And the thing is that you probably noticed it, but you just didn't pay it enough mind. You didn't think it was important enough, or you thought that it was over and it really wasn't. And sometimes what will happen, especially with men, is we will think that we discussed something so thoroughly because we added so many words that it should be okay. But communication is not connection. So just because you said a whole lot does not mean that you even penetrated the door of the heart that is holding back the tears or holding back the pain that needs to be released. And so what we end up with is some we end up with a woman who is so resentful, so bent out of shape that she would rather see you perish than to get one iota of anything. Or she'd rather perish herself. She'll give up her house, her car, her everything than to give you one iota of anything. And that's when you end up being in these court cases with some of these ladies who would rather see you and her go completely bankrupt because she doesn't want to leave the lamp. She doesn't want to leave the TV. It's not about the child. It never was. It's about her.
Brother, those are those words of wisdom. And to add on to the baby, the flooding that happens, I wouldn't even say it's a straw that breaks the camel's back. It's now you can't get away from a lot of these different conversations that you probably were getting away from or sweeping underneath the rug. Like now you had the child is here. This, what are we doing? The custody is happening. These conversations have to be had. And going back to it, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. A lot of these things we should have been working on prior. But what I've noticed with a lot of, well, myself in particular, was that is that in watching people, observation is that both people aren't really working on themselves during this case, during this custody situation. One person has retreated back into whatever it is that they got going on, and another person is possibly working on it. And that's what I would suggest the brothers do. Is that regardless of where this what happens, is that you work on yourself and you gain some clarity on what exactly is going on, and you understand like these things are happening. Child support and timeshare are two separate things. Which, and that being said, I can get this lady is telling me in order for me to see my child, I need to give her $1,000 or 500 a month or whatever it is, and this hasn't even been established with the courts. For some of us who are dealing with some of these young ladies who are having this thing going on in regards to the resentment, and they don't want to have the connection, they don't want to communicate, and it's not really about the child, it's about them. It may behoove you just to kind of go non-contact with it for now, because this thing that you could say jump and they're going to squat, and you could say squat and they're going to jump. One of the freest things to do is to understand exactly what your rights are and accept it for what it is. So prior to 2023, and maybe even several years ago in Florida, there was a standard law of visitation for the non-custodial parent. And more often, the father was known as the non-custodial parent. And that standard visitation was every other weekend, and you could possibly get a day. So it would be every other weekend, and possibly like a Thursday. So every other week, so you get every Thursday, and then you get every other weekend, which is, I think it works out to somewhere around 30 something percent, and then you had to pay child support. That was it. So back at that time, if you reframe this, and a part of reframing it is accepting that this thing is happening and not being biased towards it, that would be okay. As of now, right now, if you're within a 50-mile distance in Florida, it's a 50-50 to the best of your ability in the best interest of the child. However, you all can work that out. So understanding that it's 50-50 at this point in time, and even back then, even if it was every other weekend, to accept that this is reasonable for most cases. Unless there's some reason, you can come up with a reason as to why the child is better off with you, which is an uphill battle. Just accepting that this is what is going on, and then being able to work, and this takes knowing yourself and working on yourself. This will change the whole process in your mind, because now when you're asking for these different things, or you're arguing, or not really arguing, for asking for these different things, it's not unreasonable, because that's the statute, that's the law. What I've noticed with what happens with men is we tend to want to go tit for tat in this custody battle, and many other things. And I was taught a long time ago that you don't go tit for tat with a woman. It's just you can't win, right? You can't. It's an excuse this analogy, but it's allowing yourself to get in, what is it? Get in a fight with a pig in the mud, but the pig enjoys it, right?
Mm, good
So
God.
so you don't fight, like, you don't fight tit for tat. It's not an eye for an eye, and let them believe that it's an eye for an eye. That was one of the things that really, for me, it was interesting. From my personal experience, was that I was like, oh, this person doesn't even know what it is that I want. And I could tell that they didn't know what it was, what I wanted, because they kept on asking for something else. They kept on, because what you'll start to see is people are prying, like they're trying to figure out, how can I get this person upset? How can I get this? And so how can I do something that may hurt someone? And they do that by thinking that they're taking away from you or arguing against something. But once you start to understand that you're operating on a different level, like and I want to get into this part of the strategy, because you need to lead your case, because your attorney, and there's some great attorneys. I'm not putting up, but oftentimes attorneys do want to get it's it's business. Like, we're in a capitalist society. They have to get paid. Like, the average attorney has a couple $100,000 in student loans. They're running an office, they're running marketing. There's 100,000 attorneys in the state of Florida alone. So they have, we have to get clients. One attorney, I remember, they were like, "Oh, we're going to war," and I was like, "Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm not doing the war thing. Like, I'm leading my case. Oh, if this is what they think that they're getting, I'm going to make it seem as if that's something that I want, but it's not what I wanted, because we're not operating on the same level. So you need to lead your case. You need to take good counsel. Listen to your attorney. They've seen this. They've seen this. They understand the procedural ways of the law, the courtroom, so on and so forth. But you also need to let them know what it is that you want, and then have that purpose and that goal, as opposed to trying to figure out, going tit for tat. Well, if they say this, then I'm gonna say that. If they do this, then I'm gonna do that. There's a time and place for that, but above all, what exactly are you looking for? Otherwise, you could be stuck in this for forever. I mean, there's people who are doing court cases that have been at it for 10, 15 years. 10, 15 years. How the child is only 18 years old. How can you be in and out of the courtroom for 10 to 15 years? I have no idea, but these are some of the things that's going on.
Mm. Hmm.
Get a clear sense of yourself. Don't allow yourself to be shamed and guilted. Like I said, a lot of people are shamed and guilted into not showing up. for their child. You got to I'm not showing up for this other person at some point, especially if this person does not want to listen or even consider what it is I have to say. Start documenting and start just saying I'm showing up for my child. And they are going to put challenges in your way. I spoke about this on a couple of shows before. Moving is huge. Like this is moving, restraining orders, all of these things can come into play. You have to be stable, you have to be resilient, you have to be patient, understanding. I'm not going to call the other people evil, but there are some evil behaviors that take place within this system
Mhm.
because that's what it is. And pay attention to the people that you get around. I here's here's one of the things that I tell people when people ask for my information. I say listen, and people, everybody's sharing their opinion. I say never take advice from people that you don't want to trade places with.
Hmm.
So here you have someone who's telling you, oh well, you should do this because this is the best way to do it, or this is how it goes. And then you take a look at and you look at their relationship with the other parent. And if you want that kind of relationship, then that's different. And you notice that this person is still kicking up dust. They've been out of the courtroom for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. They're not an attorney, they're not a paralegal, they're just someone who's been through it before, and they're still going through it with the co-parent. At some point in time, you got to say, well, is what they're telling me, is this going to help or hurt my situation? Like what is going to help? Because my situation is somewhat different from theirs, and they keep going. Them and the co-parent are in and out of court. They're spending these tens of thousands of dollars. I told a brother before we got on, one of my attorneys spent $150,000 in their court case. Well, and that was a divorce case. For custody cases, come on. I mean, if you're spending, and that's together, if you're spending 30, 40, 50 grand for this case, like what is this about really? At some point in time, it can't be about the best interest of the child, right? It's an ego thing. I have to win. No, the child needs to win. That's how you reframe it.
Hmm. I think that's something to close out on. Never take advice from a person you don't want to exchange places with. That's words of wisdom. That's words of wisdom. That is words of wisdom. I love it.
Yeah. All right. So next week we will be coming back with the last part of our series. I would advise if you want to ask questions, that'll be a great time to ask questions. How can you? One of the things that really can come out of this is thinking about the communication versus, or not even versus, the communication and connection.
Yes.
Am I communicating to connect, or am I communicating to get my point across? Like, and how do I do that effectively? I guess that would be the difference. How do I effectively communicate so that I'm connecting with the person? Because when you're connecting, that's when you can start to um,
You can build together. Connection allows people to build relationships together. It also breaks down walls so that you can find out what is really going on. Connection has the potential of showing true integrity. And these are all things that we want to have, right? We want to have trust and honesty within inside of our relationships. We want to know that if someone tells me something, that they mean that, and that if they tell me they'll do something, that they'll do it. And if they don't, it's not because they were lying, it's because something happened and they really couldn't, or they really felt like they couldn't. And in those types of cases, that's where emotions do make a difference, right? Emotions have implications inside of them. When someone tells me I didn't, like my son tells me, no, I didn't take out the trash. Well, why not? I was playing a video game and I just forgot. Depending on how he gives that expression, that And if he shakes his head and he puts his hand on his head and he looks down towards the ground and I see remorse, that emotion tells me maybe something was there. Maybe he wished he did it. Maybe the intention was there. But if he just looks at me in the face like I just didn't do it, that changes things. When you're dealing with your spouse or you're dealing with your girlfriend and you get those two different style of answers, take note because you may or may not be connecting.
Amen. Guys, love you. It's been time well spent. We'll see you next week.
Peace.